Or there's audience number 2. Hey, folks.
And tag a few people in and make it a hashtag.
The fellow below me, struggling to make jokes, is Jacob Blackman, frequent co-host and the most handsome man in Norman, Oklahoma. Jacob, how are you doing this evening?
It's debatable, but it continues to be debatable.
Thank you for joining us. To my on this side, the Brady Bunch creator is Mr. Darren Drader, game designer, formerly of Wizards of the Coast, currently of Darren Drader Designs. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing really good.
Appreciate you being here because you're going to provide us with the gravitas for this serious game design discussion this evening.
The gravitas? I thought Jacob brought a lot of gravitas with him.
Yeah, you have gravitas, Jacob?
I have gravity. I am a large man, and as such, I probably generate my own gravity well.
Well, according to physics,
one too many Twinkies.
Okay, the subject for tonight is
stay in space. We all do.
In space, we all do. In 5e, Dungeons and Dragons, the world's most popular role-playing game. We're talking about the divide between spellcasters and fighters. Specifically, why do spellcasters seem so overpowered once you get above a certain level? Well, fighters are still just, hey, I can hit things good. And you're looking at, all right, I can tell you have thoughts, Darren. Please weigh in.
All right. So there is definitely a transition that occurs where at early levels, the fighters are pretty much the main show. They're out there and they're beating up the weaker monsters, and that's a pretty good way to go. But and then the wizard kind of sits back and throws its throws its cantrips out there, and the one or two spells that it has memorized. When the time is right, you throw those out there, and usually not that much impact because it's not very powerful, and that's that. At higher levels, obviously things kind of change, because at that point the melee characters become the protection for the wizards, because the wizards, instead of hitting one, you can hit half a dozen or more with like a fireball or some other area effect spell and knock out a whole bunch at once. And I think this is kind of by design. So first, the wizard kind of struggles to even stay in the game, and then later they get ahead. And then as they get ahead, they get to do things that only they can do.
That's fair. Yeah, I mean, I've heard it described as, fighters progress linearly and spellcasters progress quadratically.
Mm-hmm.
They get way more, powers, by 11, but maybe, is this why the game is better below level 10? Because everyone has a role? The numbers aren't quite so good?
I'm not convinced the game is better below level 10, to be honest with you. But yes, the numbers are easier to manage at that level.
Mm-hmm.
But the way they designed 5e, with the proficiency bonus only running 2 through 6,
mm-hmm.
there's not that much of a mathematical variance. So the big game changer becomes spells and special abilities.
Mm-hmm.
I think the game is actually perfectly manageable all the way up till 20.
Okay. Jacob, what do you think?
I agree with Darren in a lot of the case. The game is designed to be manageable so that you don't actually need magic,
mm-hmm.
Because they looked at previous editions and the fact that you had to have certain magic items in order to stay just at this equal level where you were supposed to be at certain levels.
Mm-hmm.
And they decided, let's throw all that out, balance the classes so that in 5th edition every class can hold its own from 1st to 20th, just with its abilities.
Not to disagree with you, but that's what they did in 4th edition, and everybody hated it.
It was because they made all the classes the same in 4th edition. You had a close attack. You had a close attack that hit multiple opponents. You had a far attack. You had a far attack that hit multiple opponents, and it was just variations thereon. What do we call it? What do we call it for wizards? We call for fighters. We called it cleave. For wizards, we called it burning hands. It was the same special effects, the same game mechanics, just we called it different things.
Right, repeated over and over through various classes.
Yeah. So they made that change for 5th edition to where you could still maintain the abilities of the classes from 1 to 20 without having to have magic or magic items. The magic and magic items in 5th edition are a bonus.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I think that. Sorry, go ahead.
D&D has always had built-in things to counter certain classes. Well, that was if your fighter is getting too heavy and can smite anything, there are a bunch of magical things and ranged things that can take it out, or heaven forbid a swarm of rust monsters. If your magic user getting too big in the britches, throw a bunch of golems on it and watch him scream because there's nothing you can do about him. Golems are incredibly magic immune.
Right.
That was the whole point of Vancian magic back in the old days, right? Was to limit the spellcasters so that we wouldn't have the situation where the casters are overpowered and the, melee characters not so much. That's kind of been eroded over the editions.
Well, I think, 1st and 2nd edition, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that you never got more than, a fighter never got more than 2 attacks. There was an early version of Cleave, which appeared in 2nd edition, which was if you're up against some really weak opponents and you drop one, you could just keep going, or that might have been a house rule, I don't remember. But the point is that first couple of editions, the fighter was really limited in total damage output once you got to a certain level. In 5th edition, they get up to, I want to say, 5 attacks as part of the character class. At 5 attacks, you're looking at potential damage of about 60 hit points in one round, which is kind of considerable, Wizards can also do that with some of their more powerful spells, but so the fighter does kind of keep up a little better in 5e because of the fact that they've got the increasing attacks and special abilities and that type of thing.
Cool. Let's look at the fiction for a second. If we don't consider things like the Dragonlance Chronicles, if we're just looking at pre-role-playing game fiction, you never really had wizards. Gandalf was intentionally limited. He wasn't really a front lines fighter. The one time he ever actually got into one-on-one combat, he fell out of the book, through deep water and, fire. We didn't see him for, until the next book. So, traditionally, we don't really have, before the modern era and the advent of wizards as heroes, you don't really see that character type, hanging out with fighters and doing, adventuring things. So
that was why the Dragonlance novels became so popular. And sure, they're based on D&D, yes, but just reading them on their own, they're one of the few novels where you actually see a party, a diverse party, and the magic user is actually casting freaking magic. It's not, and he does a light and drives them away, and, or he says something and they all get blinded. No, he's casting fireballs and throwing lightning bolts. He's casting actual magic in Dragonlance, and the fighters are fighting. But yeah, I think there's something to be said about being a fighter in Dungeons & Dragons. In this massive, fantastical world where you have people who have the ability to manipulate reality with their will, there is something about being a person who is just willing to go out there with their cunning and bravery and skill and try to make something of the world with whatever weapon they so choose, be it a sword or a spear or axe or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It's inspiring. You fighters really are the everyman class.
They really are the Amish of the fantasy setting.
When I don't play very often, but when I run the game, when I play, I usually play a fighter because I find it fun. You go up to the enemy and whack.
It's viscerally satisfying, right? But I don't know. Maybe the tension here is just that tabletop RPGs or specific games that we're talking about never decided if they really want to be a simulation as fantasy or have really balanced play. And maybe those two things aren't really compatible.
I don't think they are necessarily. I also think that simulationism, 5e could work on it. This is something I actually talk a bit about on my Facebook page from time to time. I think it's kind of ridiculous that a character of any level can fall off a mountain, take maximum damage. I wouldn't say maximum damage, but take the full number of damage dice, get back up and charge into battle. That doesn't happen in real life. If you fall out of an airplane, there are people who have survived falls out of an airplane. Okay, they might land in a tree and it'll break their fall, or an awning. Or there's literally one person who fell from about a mile up, landed on the ground, bounced, got back up, and walked away. That can happen. It usually doesn't, though.
But it's not the average.
It's usually not what happens.
The thing is, you have to remember that player character level people are the exception. It is not the norm. Commoners, on average, have 5-6 hit points.
Mm-hmm.
A fall is going to kill them.
Yes.
Even an exceptional commoner like the mayor, who may have 12 hit points because he's got some levels under his belt.
Uh-huh.
But player characters are supposed to be the exception. Now, that being said, when it comes to fall damage, I like what 2nd edition Pathfinder did, where the damage you take is the amount of feet you fall. You fall 100 feet, you take 100 points of damage.
That seems fair. Well, let me ask you a question. If we're talking Pathfinder, Pathfinder tried to address this with the 3-action economy and spell heightening, try to balance expression versus effectiveness. Jacob, you played Pathfinder. Do you think it worked?
I have not played Pathfinder 2nd edition. I cannot speak to it.
Okay. Well, no, Savage Worlds kind of sidesteps this, but making magic, Savage Worlds in general is kind of swingy and risky. So magic is swingy and risky there as well, so it kind of evens things out. The OSR games, they kind of lean into it and go with fragile casters.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, it's the old school Renaissance. So you're going, old school, you have glass cannons. So I don't know if that's a perfect solution, but it's definitely emulating a certain era of gaming, if you will.
Right.
It's one reason I stopped playing Wizards back in 6th or 7th grade was I got sick of, guys dying quickly when, a wandering monster showed up.
See, what I get annoyed at is all the OSR saying you have to be this fragile little wizard when all of them want to emulate Conan. And every single wizard you encounter in Conan, what they look like? Big giant bodybuilders. Every single one of them, when you encounter them, as they're described, is a giant muscly man who gets their power usually from some ring or amulet.
Well, wizards were also sometimes monsterish.
Yeah.
Undead.
And there was a horrible cost to be paid for their power, usually in terms of sanity.
Wasn't Thulsa of Doom like the original Death Knight?
I thought so.
Doesn't he have? Wasn't he kind of a cross between Skeletor and I don't know, something like that?
That was I think more in the comics. In the novels, he started out mortal, but later on, to my recollection, in like when they showed him in the comics, he was kind of like a Lich or a Death Knight or something. Yeah.
In the movies, he's Mufasa. So, sorry, low-hanging.
In the movies, he's a snake man.
Yeah.
Jacob and I had this great idea for a modern adventure with snake cultists taking over an airliner called Snake Men on a Plane. I think it's going to be like a Passenger 57 kind of thing. I think it'd be a winner. But that's another discussion for another day. Well, let me ask you guys. Maybe the way to scratch this itch and have kept melee classes who don't seem like they suck. Some of the martial arts games, especially the ones that lean into like an anime style, like the Five Rings, Lancer, some of your PBTA hacks, they suggest there's an audience for, I don't want to say kung fu, but maybe more of the melee as a spectacle, a genre fiction that D20 arguably never served that well. Although if Chuck Rice was here, he'd probably tell me that Blood and Fists did a great job of having, doing martial arts in D20. But I don't know. What do you guys think?
I've never been the biggest fan of martial arts in D&D, to be honest with you.
The monk class has problems, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I haven't done a deep dive in a monk in quite a while, so I'd have a hard time speaking to it at the moment. But I've never really cared for it, just because, on one hand they fight with their fists and they kick and all this stuff, and it's kind of more Asian flavored. And in fact, Gygax took the monk out of 1E regular D&D and put him into Oriental adventures. We don't use the word Oriental anymore, but that's neither here nor there. Now it's like, okay, so they're back and, they fight with their bare fists. So they're going up against guys in armor and punching them, and somehow that's supposed to work. And then on top of that, they falling again. And one of their abilities is, they never go splat. They just kind of softly land. I'm not a big fan of the monk.
It's kind of maybe an awkward shoehorn into medieval fantasy in general. Well, I like the idea of a fighting cleric in general. Jacob, I see you blinking down there. Are you thinking? Are you processing?
The monk as a class, and you have to figure out how it's going to interact with your game. And when it comes to fantasy, and especially D&D fantasy, I attribute monks to in the sense of the cosmology of people who are trying to understand the way to divinity through mortality and all that. So they operate with a philosophy, and they are able to manipulate their energies as they enlighten themselves.
Okay, cool. Owen says he's watching. So hey, Owen, if you're out there, good to see you, sir.
But yeah, you don't always have to include every class in the games you're playing. You can say there are no monks.
Yeah, I was just thinking of in terms of fantasy fiction. If you look at
just like sometimes I say there are no gnomes, because sometimes you have no room for particular things in your fantasy game.
There are absolutely no Dragonborn in my games.
You want other things in your games, and there are some settings that I do that with.
Mm-hmm.
That's fair. I guess I was just thinking from similar to the more Eastern fiction. Like, you don't really have wizards in your usual kung fu movies or in your Wuxia. You have melee classes, melee guys who are effectively wizards, usually through magical items, but you don't really get wizards the way we think of them here, which makes me think maybe this whole problem we're talking about is more of a Western RPG issue. But also, interesting note on Thulsa Doom, he was not originally a Conan villain.
Really?
He was in the Howard stories as a villain. He was a skull-faced sorcerer in the Cull stories.
Oh, the Call of the Conqueror. Okay.
Yeah, and then he was later grafted into Conan. I want to say Roy Thomas and Marvel grafted into Conan comics later, and that's how he got. Apparently, the people who made the movie read the comics, and that's how he became the main villain in the original Conan movie. So.
Interesting. Okay.
You know that Oliver Stone was one of the writers on that movie.
I think maybe that's why it's so good, because it's kind of got that sort of edgy, trippy.
I believe he made them take his name off it.
Really? Okay, then I eat my words, I guess. But he wasn't happy with the final product.
I would imagine that's it. Let's see. Publicly expressed regret over how his original script was handled, and has described production sales to Dino De Laurentiis as a mistake. One of the things a lot of people don't know is the original Conan movie, the way he envisioned it, looked a lot more like He-Man.
Okay.
We're talking crazy technology and stuff like that.
All right. Yeah. What I'm reading is that when he originally got the job to write it, he was told that there was no budget ceiling. Just basically go crazy. And apparently he was doing a lot of shrooms while he was writing this.
Never tell a writer they have an unlimited budget.
Yeah. His draft was set, according to this film website, in a post-apocalyptic future where Conan fights mutants rather than a wizard.
Yep.
The guy named Milius took over nearly everything. Described his original script as a total drug fever dream. Okay, so yeah.
Apparently he blew all that budget up his nose.
So in other words, it's a good thing.
Yeah, I guess so. All right, and his very next movie was Scarface. Right, that was an Oliver Stone script too, which I did not realize.
Yeah, look, stuff going up their nose. What do I say?
Well, there's a consistent element here with Oliver Stone stories. It seems like there's always drugs. All right, so have we mined this thread as much as we can? Is this a real issue?
There is always going to be a place for fighters and wizards to be side by side in the story. It is up to the GM to create those elements. Use the toys. Have enemies counterspell. Have enemies cast anti-magic fields. Have enemies, set up their bases in anti-magic places when they're wanting to do stuff and not have wizards bother them. It's like, I don't want any wizards being able to teleport in my place. I will park over there where I know magic doesn't work.
Over in the suburbs of North New Jersey, where it's a known pocket of powerful mundanity that no magic can work.
Exactly.
Apparently, in some organized play organizations, caster supremacy is an acknowledged problem, and they have guidelines, just like what Jacob laid out, for how to make sure everyone feels like they're getting to contribute and getting to do something at the table.
There is something I've been hearing about a lot online, and I just got to say, oh my God, because there's this whole group of people who don't like spells being used against them. And I was like, this is part of the game. If you don't want hold person to paralyze you, then guess what? You don't get to use hold person against the bad guys. You don't want to be counterspelled, then you don't get to counterspell. You can't have it one way. These are all spells and elements of the game, and it works both ways.
I have a problem with this entire philosophy. Without trying to sound too much, because I'm not a right winger at all. I'm very liberal, but there is a certain slice of gamers who kind of demand their participation trophy, and what you're talking about is absolutely one of them. They don't want to be strategic. They don't want to be really good at what they're doing. They just want to,
They want a power fantasy.
Yeah, they want exactly. They want a power fantasy. They want an amusement park is what they want. Those are the people who 5e as written. It's good for them for the most part. My next Kickstarter is going to be the Daring and Dread RPG, which is going to be the 5e base, but the motto is stop playing on easy mode. I'm going in the opposite direction. I'm trying to make things more challenging for everybody.
I've heard that from a few designers of our generation that I don't want to say the new kids, but the new kids want it a little bit easier. Don't want to, learn the rules. Don't want to, as you say, they want it, they want the bumper cars as opposed to the.
Yeah, I don't think that rewards people who want to master the system.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been, that was like a big part of 3.5. Know really what works in 3.5 so you can build your character and be a total badass. And mid-maxing can be kind of annoying, frankly, at times. But even so, I think that strategy and building your character intelligently should be an aspect of the game. And this whole idea, don't cast spells at me. Well, boo fucking who.
So I think some people want to cozy your game, and that's fine. But I can see, you have different expectations from people who've been playing for their whole life, and it had one flavor. Then it's different.
Yeah, these are all things that should be hashed out in a session 0 with your group and a GM. If you want to play a certain way and you don't want certain things to happen, you need to find a group that's willing to accommodate you. But if you want to play with a group, a mixed group, often at a convention or something, you have to accept that all of the toys are going to be in play.
Yep.
I thought it'd be fun as an experiment just to do single party groups occasionally. Sorry, single class groups.
Those can totally work, especially in 5th edition. You have a single class. Everyone takes a different subclass, and it works amazingly.
I could see that, but I thought it might be fun to play. Everyone's a cleric. They
Yeah.
have, religious arguments as they're adventuring. Of course, healing is no problem. Or everyone's playing a fighter. It's just a different vibe. It's more Band of Brothers or something like that. And then
that was one of the things that came up when I worked at WotC when they did the play testing for 3rd edition. The play testers basically said, "Why doesn't everybody play a cleric? You can hit, you can wear any armor, you can heal. If everybody's got all that healing, plus all the armor, you're more powerful than most parties."
Yeah, that's fair. Playing a whole party of just spellcasters, that could be fun just for the sheer destruction you can bring to bear. A whole party of thieves has its own problems too. Whole party of rangers, a whole party of bards. That'd be awesome.
I've seen an all bard party, and they were all in the same band, and it was a fun time.
All right, well,
at level 1, they all started out as bards, but they were allowed to multi-class from there.
Okay, well, that works. All right, guys. Well, I think we've talked this subject into the ground. We've been trying to do occasional series of 5e, and this one I kind of got mangled because we had to reschedule once or twice. What should be our next 5e adjacent subject? Maybe for next weekend.
Put me on the spot. I'm not sure. We covered falling.
We covered falling.
I do have a new system for falling that's going to end up in the Daring and Dread RPG, but I'm not going to get into that right now. And okay. I think that making that the subject for an entire podcast would be incredibly boring and dull.
That could be a problem.
Are dragons powerful enough?
Are dragons powerful enough?
Who knows?
Are there enough dragons?
Do laser guns belong in your fantasy?
I can't tell if you're being sarcastic right now. Help me out.
I have no idea.
Okay.
I'm just spitballing here.
All right, we can talk about it offline. That's what email's for. So, folks, thanks for tuning in to watch us tonight. Owen, if you're out there, we'll catch you next time. And check out next time, everybody, on the BAM Podcast.